I think we're recording. We are. All right. Welcome to this week's episode of Fat, Drunk, and Stupid. I'm Rob with you as always. And this week I have someone who is not fat, drunk, or stupid, thankfully. I have Lisa Scott from the What's Next with Lisa podcast. Lisa, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. I want to start by saying we're recording this on International Podcast Day. I didn't know that was a thing. So happy International
Oh, right
Podcast
on.
Day.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of your podcast. I really enjoy it.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
I think it's different. I think it's unique in a lot of ways. And you're an LPC. That's what you do
I
for a living.
am. Yep.
So how did you get into that? First of all.
What a loaded question. I actually got into that in undergrad, to be quite candid. I didn't want to do something that involved math.
Mm,
So got a degree in social work and
yeah.
then started working with people. And I'm like, this is really interesting. So when I went to grad school, I went with a psychology degree, and my career progression has just kind of been one that it's been clinical. And I've worked in clinical settings in hospitals and long-term care facilities working with folks with mental illness and psychosis.
Mhm.
And then probably about a year and a half ago, I decided to go out on my own and start a private practice. And I think that's been the most eye-opening therapy experience for me, because I still see people of all walks of life, but I see people, rather than having to be in the hospital, I see people coming to me asking for help. And that's what kind of inspired me to start my podcast. It's like, how do I get this to as many people that want it and that want the help, but maybe can't afford therapy or don't know where to turn? How do I just kind of spoon feed and deliver this to people so they can do and hopefully help themselves with it?
I mean, that's great because that's one thing I think is uh, important for people to realize. I think sometimes it takes something for someone to say, "Okay, I'm going to go talk to somebody," or "I'm going to ask for some help,"
Hmm.
or something like that. And
For
you and I,
sure.
we messaged a little bit, and I was telling you that I'm a veteran, and it took
Hmm.
me. I got out of the army in '07. I went to
Okay.
Iraq twice. Once in '03, once in '05. I got out in '07. It took me until 3 years ago to actually go to the VA and get
Yeah.
uh, and talk to somebody. But
Hmm.
it's different. It's different for everybody. But it took like me talking to my buddies
Yeah.
because so many years went by where we didn't really talk about anything. And
Hmm.
like one guy would text and say, "Hey, let me talk to you. Have you ever had this go on? Have you had a nightmare? Have you ever dealt with this? Has this happened?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it did. I didn't really know what to think of it, but so those things are and kind of and with what you do, like I've talked about that a little bit on my podcast, kind of to
Hmm.
I guess make more people aware that it goes on. But also, I think
Yeah.
if, like you said, if you hear someone talking about it, and the way you do your
Hmm.
podcast is so great because it is a very upbeat kind of thing, the way you present it, I think.
Thanks.
And
Thanks.
because I think people associate it with, such a gloom and doom kind of aspect.
Yeah.
And so when people do decide to come to you, do you feel like it's a lot of times it's is it like a certain event that makes them finally go do it, or you think it's just kind of an overtime kind of thing?
Oh, so, I would say more than ever since the pandemic started, I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing a lot of couples that just that space together is triggering them to come get help. But I want to back up just a little bit to your point of the things that you experienced or the way that you and your friends talked after you got out. And
Mm-hmm.
hearing you explain that is literally like listening to my boyfriend is an Air Force vet, and his closest
Mm-hmm.
friends are Army vets. And so like listening to
Mm-hmm.
them like, hey, how do you deal with this, or how do you manage this? And I sit over in the corner like, we can do better, you guys. And I think being around them, what that's
Yeah.
taught me the most about a lot of what you guys experience is, one, somebody that hasn't done it or experienced is never really going to get it. That being said, though, I don't know that anybody does a great job preparing you guys for when you come home to
Mm-hmm.
know that these certain things, no, they're not normal, and they're not just something you suck it up and deal with. We can do better, and we can help you figure out who you are, post
Mhm.
service. And I think that a lot of times there's a misconception like, well, isn't this just part of the deal? Like, don't I just deal with this now?
Mhm.
And I also think it's a scary thing because not a lot of people can really connect to what you guys have gone through.
Yeah.
And it takes a pretty special person, I think, and a special therapist to find that connection to say, let me understand. I'll never get it really, but let me try to understand so I can help you get where you need to be.
Mhm.
And when I have people come into the practice, I would say sometimes it's a single event and I'll see them maybe like 1 or 2 sessions, but most of the time it's usually a progression. I would say the biggest thing I see are people in their 20s and 30s that they're growing up and they're doing this thing called adulting.
Mhm.
And they're like, it's just not working. Like
Mhm.
something's not working and I don't know what it is. And so a lot of times that's about uncovering, like, how have you learned to cope? Your parents could have been like, you could have had the all-American family, but that doesn't mean that there weren't things you picked up in childhood that made it really hard for you to function in a healthy way as an adult. And so sometimes I think uncovering the why you're doing what you're doing is more important than really even understanding what you're doing. If that makes sense.
It does, because that's something that I always kind of thought about was at certain times when I would feel a certain thing or do
Mm-hmm.
something, I would think, why do I feel that way? Like, why do I do that? Like, why do I
Mm-hmm.
react that way? And it was really eye opening for me because I went to uh, a therapist. Well, I've been to a couple actually, but
Mm-hmm.
the one that I liked the most, she was very direct with me, which works.
Yeah.
She was a very cut to shit kind of person, and I would tell her
Yes.
something, and she would say, "You, that's not true. You're lying," you know, because
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that it's very hard to be honest with yourself in those
Mhm.
situations. Would you agree with that? Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
work if you're not honest with yourself, and you have to have,
Oh, yeah.
and and you could probably tell when people are are faking it for better for a better term. But
Oh, yeah.
that was a big, big turning point for me. I mean, that really was her kind
Mhm.
of digging down, because I was kind of
And
still
holding
very
you
protected.
accountable, right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, holding you accountable. And, we always say that you can't change what you don't acknowledge. But to
Mm-hmm.
take that a step further, you're never going to acknowledge anything you're not honest about. If you're bullshitting yourself, you can tell your therapist whatever you think they want to hear, but the only person that's really hurting in the end is you. And
Right.
I like that she would say that's not true, you're lying, because
Mm-hmm.
I think an effective therapist, an effective counselor, um, their job is not to save you. Their job is to empower you and teach you how to save yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so holding you accountable is, I mean, and that's kind of my approach to you, just
Mm-hmm.
in regard to like direct, like, what are we doing here? What do you want? And how can we hold you accountable? Because I think, especially in today's day and age, people want results. They
Mm-hmm.
want to know, like, what do I do? How do I fix this? I just want to feel better. Well, then you got to get honest with yourself real quick,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I learned that from her. Was my big takeaway from her was it's like everyday maintenance. You're
Yeah.
gonna have good days and bad days. When
Yeah.
you have a bad day, don't beat yourself up, because I think that does happen. It makes it worse because if
Mm-hmm.
you know, because then you feel bad about something that you already kind of feel weird about to begin with,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it kind of compounds the problems.
Yes.
Uh,
And
I will.
pressure,
Mhm.
that's pressure. I mean, you putting pressure on yourself, you think about when we put pressure on anything, that's heavy. And that's
Mhm.
heavy to carry around. And so, yeah, the more you berate and belittle yourself, the heavier that gets and the harder it is to get out from underneath of it. And, if I could give any advice for just like one little smidge of advice for somebody to start doing today, this minute, be accountable for how you talk to yourself and how you approach yourself. And I guarantee we could all use a softer approach to ourselves. We are our own worst critics. And if
Hmm.
you want to grow and thrive and do anything that quote feels better, you've got to soften your approach to yourself and give yourself a little bit of credit for being human, you
That's
know?
true. Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
and like you mentioned now with COVID going on and this year being the worst year
Yeah.
of all years, apparently, I mean,
Yeah.
I think trying to take care of yourself has got to be your main
Hmm.
priority at this point. Now, you mentioned like the
Hmm.
couples having issues, what kind of stuff do
Yeah.
you see with that? I mean, how do
Oh
people even
God.
approach that?
Oh God.
You're stuck in a house together, the world's burning, probably,
I mean,
uh,
and if I had a dollar for how many times each couple, like when we end the session, will say, are we just like your worst couple? Are we the most messed up couple you have? I'm always like, no, you guys are fine. It's just so
you're
bad.
like,
I'm like,
no,
how
not
have
at
you made
all.
it this far? No, you guys are totally fine. I've seen way worse. I shouldn't be giving out my secrets, but yeah, I see a lot of communication problems, a
Yeah.
lot of tit for tat, he said, she said, and the one thing, the each couple, each person is unique. Relationships are not 50-50, they are 100-100, which means hopefully
Hmm.
each person, brings some sense of their best selves to the table. And what I see a lot is everyone going on the defensive and trying to like win the argument, or hey, I'm right, you're wrong. And my problem with that is that in theory, yeah, it feels really good to be right. But you've got to remember who's losing when you're right, and that's your person.
Right.
And that's not how you grow. You grow by trying to like learn and see the emotion behind them and learn their process. And if all you want to do is be right, I don't know if you should have gotten married.
No, no, that's
It
not a
doesn't
good
happen
idea.
often.
It's not, no, it's not about
Yeah.
being right. I mean, I think back to even my wife and I mean, I've been working from home since March, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, she has her office nearby, but she's been home several days a week, and
Yeah.
and it's been working out for the most part. But there are times where I think it's like we, everybody has to have their own individual activities. I think to just relax
Yep.
and de-stress or whatever. And so for
Yes.
me, it's either, hey, I want to sit on the patio and I'm gonna have a
Mm-hmm.
cigar and I'm gonna have a drink and I'm just gonna relax. And she's like,
Yeah.
well, I thought we were gonna watch something together. And I'm like, well, we've watched
Uh,
TV the last 6 nights in a row. I think I want to go sit out on the patio, you know. But see, to her,
they want to tag
like,
out on this one.
yeah, I was like, I think I'm good. No, but to her, like, she has her own business, so she's, how that can
Yep.
be pretty stressful.
Oh yeah.
And so her idea of relaxing is like just, hitting the couch, just kind of unplugging, putting on like Real Housewives or something and just kind of
Yep.
relaxing, right? And for me, I'd rather play guitar or go out on the patio or something like that, So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's hard for the other person to not take
Yes.
personal. And
Oh yeah.
it's not that I don't want to be with her. It's just
Right.
that her individual activity and my individual activity don't usually jive, you know?
Coexist. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that kind of has been a little source of friction, I guess we could say. But I mean, that's just like
Yeah.
you said. You're in a house together. Nobody's going out for drinks with their friends. Nobody's
That's
going on,
right.
going here, going there. I mean, so I think it
Hmm.
really reveals probably a lot of things that people ignore over time. I mean, wouldn't you
Oh,
say?
yes. Oh, yes. Because when you can disconnect from a relationship and get out and avoid maybe what's really happening, that's
Mm,
a band-aid fix, right? But when you're thrown into it, it starts to become really apparent maybe what's not working. And, I would say if you want my 2 cents on your situation there, I think that's like it's totally normal. And it's you're right, it's hard not to take it personally. And
mm,
a really good reminder that I try to give couples sometimes is before you take it personally, see if you can throw like just a 2-second pause in there and say, all right, is him smoking a cigar and sitting on the patio. Would I classify that as healthy space or unhealthy space? Unhealthy space being, right, like avoiding, shutting down, leaving for days at a time, not communicating, unhealthy space. Healthy space is, how do I recharge so that I can continue to give to this marriage and still feel good as an individual, because you are still individuals, right? And it's interesting, and I'd have to look back. I know I did an Instagram post about it, but when I talked about attachment theories, and that a lot of times people who grew up in homes that had parents who left or weren't emotionally available, they have a really hard time as adults classifying healthy space as a safe space, because it might feel really dangerous to that person. Like, oh, well, wait a minute, are you leaving me, or are you just taking care of yourself? Right.
Yeah.
Which is
No,
a
that's
huge
true.
deal.
Yeah,
No,
I
and
think that
I do it too. It's hard.
yeah, it's hard. Sometimes I find myself, because and I mean, it's both of them. She has things that she likes to do, but it's like I think I'm much more of a, like I don't know how to explain it. Much more of an independent. I don't want to say independent. That's not. She jokes about me and tells me it's because I'm an only child that I like to go by myself. That's why I like to do that.
Is that a joke?
And see, she has. I don't know. I
She
can't
might
tell.
have
I
a
think it's
point.
serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but no. I mean, we're very fortunate. We're both worked through this whole thing, and we've been able to,
Yeah.
really just kind of hunker down at home for the most part and enjoy it. But it's just, to me, it's
Good.
like these funny observations that I make. And it really has come down to, like you were saying, just communicating, just being like, hey, look, tomorrow night I'm going to go do this thing. I mean, so it really makes a big difference, I think, when it comes down to
Yeah.
the communication part.
Yeah.
But we started doing, well, we got a above ground pool. That was a big game changer for the 3-year-olds. That was a big deal for the
Oh,
summer.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Very
we got her a
cool.
little
Very cool.
a trampoline with a bar she can hang on to. So she just sit there. She's like,
Fantastic.
boing, boing, boing. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
perfect.
No, that's
I
crazy.
love it.
But do you? One thing I was gonna wanted to mention too is that I think social media plays a big factor on people's mental health
Oof.
for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And I read this. I know there's a big study about how, uh, like when it comes to divorce, like Facebook is mentioning like 60% of them or something like that. I mean, do you see a lot of like
Ooh.
social media problems, stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I see. Yes. Yes is the short answer. And it's
Yes,
interesting.
absolutely. All of
Yes, all bad. No, they're
them.
wonderful. But I see different problems with different age ranges. And what's interesting is that kids today, I sound super old, but kids today, they've never known a world where you don't actually pick up the phone to call somebody. All they've ever known with connecting is social media. And what I see with like the teenage, young 20s groups is that their self identity is they're mimicking this social media stuff, and they're
Mhm.
using it in an unhealthy way because they're aspiring to be that. So it's robbing them of an opportunity to really have a self identity that they're proud of and that they feel good about,
Mhm.
right? And then the older you get, I think the more people compare. They
Mhm.
compare themselves to other people. Well, I should be here. They're doing this. Why isn't this happening for me? Why am I so messed up? Whatever that is. And I always caution people that you've got to remember social media is the highlight reel.
Mhm.
Very rarely do people post like, I'm $50,000 in credit card debt. Happy Monday. Like nobody posts that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think the only place people post that is Twitter, because I think Twitter is it's like a misery over exaggeration contest. Everybody's like, you know,
Yeah, right.
I'm depressed, just ate pizza laying in bed, and everybody's like, oh, retweet, which I think is kind of funny.
Right. You can kind of get
But
away
yeah,
with that. Instagram and
yeah.
TikTok. I'm not on
Mm.
TikTok, but I have a lot of teenagers that come through my office, and I'm just like, what are you people doing with your lives? Like, what is this TikTok you
Mhm.
speak of,
Like,
you
what is
know?
this? Yeah. No, I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
that like one thing you were pointed out is when people look at like as you get older and you see people you went to high school with and they're
Oh yeah.
buying a house and they're doing something,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of feel kind of, if you don't feel like you're on par with them, you feel but it makes you feel
Mm-hmm.
bad, right? And
Yeah.
and like you said, people do. I think people try to portray themselves a certain way. I think,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
especially on Facebook. I think Facebook's big for that, personally.
Oh yeah. No,
You know.
I agree 100%. It's and I think that we're all kind of guilty of it. And I also think it's a natural human reaction. Like when I see people, for example, and I'll talk about myself
Hmm.
because that's what I know. But when I
Hmm.
see people I went to high school with and they've got kids old enough graduating from high school this year, we have a 2.5-year-old running around the house. And I'm like, did I miss the timeline? Am I like the old, it's so it's like in my daily life, I'm super happy with how things have played out and I'm grateful for it. But yeah, there's like that little twinge when I see that, I'm like, oh my God, they had kids when they were like 20. Who
Yeah.
did that?
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
And you start to second guess, like, oh, well, have I done it wrong?
Hmm.
Um, and I think that that's a rabbit hole that's really really scary place to be, because and that's why it's so important, honestly, to I think have a healthy appreciation for what social media is,
Hmm.
but use it accordingly. And if you're comparing yourself to other people, or you want to talk about couples, I've seen quite a few couples who have reconnected with people in their past
Hmm.
on Facebook or the Insta, and they've had like these like secret lover affairs. And I'm just like, I had a couple last week. I'm like, I didn't even
Uh,
know Instagram could do that.
anything with that you can communicate with, it's going to
You could do
happen.
anything.
Yeah.
Like,
It's.
wow, that's
I,
something.
I think that's something too. Is that of course stuff like that has always been around. Like but people, social media gets the blame for that. But I think that
Oh yeah.
when you say that just makes it easier, I guess, right, to reconnect and have that
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we tend to live in a world where everyone feels like they have a right, but not very much responsibility.
True. Yeah.
And I'm a huge, to bring it full circle, when I am counseling individuals or couples or whoever I'm counseling, um, my my number one rule is you can blame people for a lot of things. You can get angry at them, you can get frustrated or sad that they're at a different place in their life, whatever it is. But you're
Hmm.
100% responsible and accountable for what you choose to do with it. And so if you're using things like social media to hide or avoid something going on in the real world, or,
Hmm.
to use it to because you're feeling bad about yourself or whatever it is, I would challenge you to say, I'm worthy of more than this.
True.
I'm accountable for what I do with this. And that's definitely an inside job. And it's a very kind of cliche thing that we hear a lot. Oh, you have to love yourself first. I don't even know about love yourself as much as really understand what your worth and value are and choose you,
Hmm.
because that's just, that's unfortunate. And it makes me sad when I have people in my office that are like on that societal timeline, like, well, I'm 29 and I should be having a family. Well, should and shouldn't are rooted in shame, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Oh yeah.
And I think you got to do what feels good and what makes you happy, and
Hmm.
cut that outside noise out. That's how you live an authentic, fulfilled life. You do what is becoming of you as a good human being and what's important to you. And you can look at other stuff, but say defining yourself by it is just a really slippery slope.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to. At the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you. And
Yep.
we had a friend of ours who's she was um she's a lot younger than us, but she was, kind of wigging out about, oh, I should be doing this by now and all this kind of thing. And I said, look,
Hmm.
I I was in the army, then I was a police officer. Then at 35 years old, I went to college, which was a trip going to college at 35 years
Yeah,
old.
right.
uh, and I started a whole new career, doing what I'm doing now. And
Mhm.
I said, so
Mhm.
you don't have to be what you think people should think you should be. It's okay to
Exactly.
try something and say, hey, you know what,
Mhm.
this isn't working out. Let me figure something else out. And
Yeah.
I,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
and she, obviously she's a young woman. She also not married. So then there's more
Mhm.
pressure there, to,
Mhm.
and I was, and, we're like, look, don't just settle for some dude just to say you're married. That's a mistake because people make that mistake a lot.
Yes. I'm raising my hand.
I mean, it happens because there's I always say it was funny because like when you're
Yeah.
like when you're a kid, people would
Mhm.
joke with you and say, when you gonna have a girlfriend or when you have a boyfriend? Then you have a boyfriend or girlfriend.
Yeah.
Oh, when you get married? When you
Mm.
having a kid? When you doing this?
Yep.
And
Yep.
all except for my granddad, he used to say, "Don't do it, Rob. Don't do it. Don't do it." He used to always say that all the time. Probably a
Don't
smart
do it.
guy, I think. Yeah, he was very wise. He's like, "Don't do it. Don't do it."
Oh,
But
that's sweet.
so, I know you have to listen to people's problems all the time, but
Yeah.
obviously I would assume that it probably affects you in some ways. I mean, I mean, but you also enjoy helping people, I think. I mean, how do you kind of manage that? How do you kind of, unplug a little bit from that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny because I have a tendency to be a pretty soft heart. Like if I see an older person struggling, in the grocery store, my poor boyfriend, I start crying because I feel so sad that like that's how they're living. But when it
Yeah.
comes to like my clients, I've always had an ability, I think, to have a really strong boundary. And also I take it really seriously. Um, and I always feel like it's an honor to be able to help people through some of the toughest times of their life. So it's a
Mhm.
responsibility I take seriously. So I've always had a pretty strong sense of boundary when it comes to
Yeah.
people, when it comes to getting emotionally invested. Do I care about them all? 100%. I'm invested in their success. But I think why I've made it this long in this business too is that
Mhm.
I have been able to detach in all the right ways emotionally. That being said, though, that doesn't mean that there aren't days where I just feel like nothing's going right, or I had a super intense, client that was scary or whatever was
Mhm.
happening. And I'm a little bit like your wife. I want to come home and I want to sit
Mhm.
on the TV, like on the couch and watch TV and not talk. I just
Mhm.
need like an hour to not talk to anybody.
Mhm.
And I would say like once a quarter, probably once every 3 or 4 months, I do the whole, well, who's here to help me?
Yeah, exactly. Who wants to listen to me for a minute?
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yeah.
um, so
I'm glad you mentioned that too because my wife is we're different in that way where I'll say, "How was your day?" and she's like, "Oh," and I'll say, "Well, what happened? Tell me what happened." And she's like,
yeah.
I don't really want to get into it right now." And I because I'm more of a tell me what happened so we can try to fix it kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And she's
Hmm.
very much like no, it's okay. It's not really any fixing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But I'll just like, and I'll say, okay, okay, it's cool. But that does make a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So those days are rare for me, but I think, self-care. We hear so much about self-care, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I have to remind myself and give myself a dose of advice too that self-care isn't just doing things that feel good,
Mm-hmm.
massages or cigars or whatever it is, which that
Mm-hmm.
is part of it. But I think the foundation of self care that a lot of people miss, and I have to remind myself of, is it means treating myself with respect
Mm-hmm.
and being soft with myself and figuring out what it is I need and connecting to my worth and my value. That's self care because you've got to take care of that your body and your brain and your heart that's taking care of you.
Definitely.
You've got to treat it with respect. And that
Mm.
is the foundation of good self-care, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that because I mean it makes you feel better. Get enough sleep.
Hmm.
That's a big thing.
Yep.
Eating pretty good. I mean, you don't have to be super strict. That's another thing. I think people, you know, people, everybody wants to lose. Pretty much everybody thinks they should lose weight, and then so then
Oh,
that's
sure.
stress. Everything you eat, then you
Yep.
stress about it, and it bothers you and stuff,
Beat yourself
and
up for it.
you
Yep.
beat yourself up for it, And what I've tried to do, especially working from home, is I
Hmm.
still try to uh, get out and go for a walk or something like that. Get up, move around more because obviously,
Hmm.
everybody's talked about the COVID-19 pounds because everybody's at home and you're
Oh,
not
yeah.
really out moving around, right? So, and
Right.
I could, and if I like on my lunch hour, I go out and walk like 30 minutes, around the block or something like that.
Good for
And
you.
it's such a big mood lifter. Like I'm not like throwing weights
Hmm.
around or doing CrossFit or anything, but I can tell that I feel
Hmm.
better on those days when I get to
Yes.
do that. So, excuse me.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. Even just something small, like that is a big deal.
Hmm. And I think that it's different for everybody. And you're right, moving, your body wants to move. We were born to move. And, we all hear about the happy chemicals that are released and the endorphins when you're working out. But I think just interrupting that monotony sometimes of your daily routine and
Hmm.
giving yourself that gift of saying, I just need to get outside, what a gift. And
Yeah.
it's different for everybody. And so good for you for doing that because not everybody does, right? And then they
Yeah.
wonder like why they feel bad because it's super easy just to, chill and say, "Oh, I feel terrible." And but it's about self accountability and saying, "What can I do here? What can I control? What do I have
Hmm.
control over?" And that's not as easy
Yeah.
for everyone as it is for others.
No, it isn't. And I think, for having been in the military and my time in
Yeah.
police work, I've always been, in and out of the gym. I've always tried to work out, stay in pretty decent shape, even after I got out, still just because it makes me feel
Mhm.
good. Because I know then
Mhm.
if I go a while without doing anything, I start thinking that I'm like a slob and I'm and I
Yeah.
and I just need to do something, but
Mhm.
it is a simple thing. And the with uh COVID going on, did you ever do any video sessions with people, or is that still going on?
Did. Yeah. So it was interesting because I had been part-time at the local hospital as I started my private practice and I was working in the
Hmm.
emergency department there and private practice was going well, so I'm like I'm going to do this. I'm going to quit. I'm going to just, take my own advice and push through the fear. And no kidding, a week after I quit the hospital, the world shut down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is an amazing time to start a business. Fantastic job, Lisa.
Hmm.
Um, and thank you, Google, for letting me know that my business was down 84% in March. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, but so I did telehealth. Um, and out of necessity in our state, I'm in Colorado right now, they were asking us all to do strictly telehealth for the month of March, and then the
Hmm.
first 2 weeks in April I wasn't in the office, and then slowly as we started getting mask mandates and more information, I'm back in the office. And so I still have some clients that feel more comfortable doing a Skype or a FaceTime or phone session, which is, the way of the future. I think there's something awesome about a connection in person, but
Right.
I've definitely learned a lot with the necessity of having to do the video sessions, how to
Hmm.
sort of change my approach to keep people more connected. And
Yeah.
I think that's the counselor's responsibility too. I mean, you do the best with what you have, but gosh darn it, I really wanted to make sure that especially during this time people felt connected and that they were listened to.
Hmm.
So yeah, it takes tweaking my approach a little bit, definitely, but yes, still doing it.
Oh,
And I'm
good.
in the office now. So yeah.
All right. Good. Well, we're gonna head about wrapping up here. And
All right.
so you're how long have you been doing your podcast?
So I started my podcast in quarantine, legit.
Hmm.
I'd been thinking about it for a long time and then just started it in quarantine. So it's March. So
Okay. Good.
yeah.
And you are going to be doing season 2. Have you started season 2 yet?
Yes. So started recording a little bit. It's coming out the first week in October.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to take this month off and I feel like in season 1, we covered kind of some broad topics, just like general
Mm-hmm.
information of like points to ponder. And this season, I
Mm-hmm.
really want to start to take more of a detailed look at certain things, clinical depression, PTSD, and
Mm-hmm.
really start to get to the root of some more things that people can actually say, hey, this is something I'm struggling with. What does she have to say about this and what can I use? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the goal with season 2, is just to dig a little bit deeper and get more detailed.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's what I was told, was I had PTSD and clinical depression when I finally
Mm.
went to the VA, and
Hmm.
I was like, okay, so what do I do now?
Right. What do I do?
Now that I have this information, what do I do with it? So
Yeah,
it can be hard to reconcile a little bit. I did
of
feel a little bit
course.
of I did feel like once they told me that, because I kind of knew
Hmm.
already, you
Hmm.
know, but once I felt like I walked around with this big sign on me that said I have PTSD and clinical depression.
Mm.
You just kind
Yeah.
of feel weird about it. Plus, there's a stigma of
Hmm.
the
Oh, yeah.
the damaged veteran, kind of thing and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But you know, that's why I like to try and talk about some of that stuff when I can to try to share it with
Yeah.
other people, and maybe that makes
Yeah.
them more comfortable with talking about it too. So I will definitely be
Absolutely.
listening for
And
those. I'm looking
well,
forward to that.
I'm grateful for that. And I have to tell you and anybody else that's listening, that's struggling with PTSD or clinical depression, especially our vets, like, I understand the stigma and I understand feeling like you're walking around with a sign. It doesn't feel good. You feel like something's broken.
Hmm.
I would challenge you to reframe that and say, I'm proud of this and I earned this, and I didn't earn it in a way that felt very good all the time. But
Right.
I'm proud of who I am and I'm proud of who I'm becoming, because there are just no greater people on earth than our vets, if you ask
Mm.
me. So
Yeah,
I
it's true.
I have a lot of respect for you guys, and it's not easy, and answers will come though. And the social stigma of mental health, I could talk for hours about.
Hmm.
And I tell people all the time, think about if you broke your arm and you went to the doctor and he said, hey, you need a cast, and you said, no, I'll go it alone, I'm fine. Like, does that make sense?
Right. It doesn't.
And
No.
so, like, it
Yeah.
doesn't. And so if something's going on and not balanced, or you're needing some help, like, please keep reaching and
Hmm.
find help. There's somebody that will connect with you, and if they can't figure out how to connect with you, they'll do their darndest to try. So, and you guys are all
Yeah.
worth it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Where can we find you if we want to keep up with what's next with Lisa?
You can find me on Instagram at What's Next with Lisa. I'm on Twitter, What's Next with Lisa. And then I encourage everybody to email me too if they've got questions or things they're struggling with and they'd love a show topic on it. It's What's Next with Lisa at gmail.com. And yeah, I'm going to kick off season 2 actually with a relationship question and answer, but we're going to add a little male perspective in the mix. So
Oh, there you go.
it'll, yeah, so that'll be good. So I'm excited
Good.
about that. So if there's anything that anybody wants to hear they're struggling with, please reach out.
Okay. And good. I'll put all that up there when I post the episode too, so people can catch up with you. I really
Awesome.
appreciate you hanging out and talking. I hope we can talk again in the future, hopefully.
I would love it. I would love it.
Good.
I appreciate you, Rob. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right. See ya.